They found it by accident. Deep beneath a palace in Istanbul, archaeologists broke through a sealed wall and discovered a room that shouldn't exist. On the stone, scratched in desperation, a phrase in Latin, lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in darkness, and beside it, dozens of crosses, carved by fingernails, by women who had been erased from history. This is their story. Greece. 1450. The bells of the monastery ring for the last time. Abbess Eleni stands at the altar, silver crucifix trembling in her hands. Outside, the Ottoman army closes in. Red banners bleeding across the horizon like a wound. No messengers have returned from neighbouring villages. No soldiers remain to defend them. Inside, young nuns hide relics beneath stone floors. Others clutch icons as if touch alone could stop what's coming. None of them cry. Not because they're not terrified, but because tears have no meaning when history has decided to erase your name. Eleni closes her eyes and listens. The earth trembles. Olive trees whisper. Incense dies in the flames. Then she sees it. In the distant torchlight, the silhouette of empire approaching. Not with sword or word, but with absolute quiet. The kind of silence that precedes great disappearances. Because before the empire took their bodies, history had already taken their silence. The first cannon shot comes before dawn, a deep, shattering boom that cracks windows and rains dust from ceilings. The air fills with gunpowder's bitter stench. The bells never ring, silenced by Ottoman cannons aimed from the valley below. Each blast is a sentence written in fire. Saints' statues shatter. A crack splits the Virgin's face in two. Compassion and ruin. Nuns run to the altar, covering sacred relics with bare hands. Eleni moves between them, impossibly calm. Her eyes hold the certainty of someone who's watched the end approach too slowly. The walls scream as they fall. Light invades the chapel like an animal devouring shadow. Instead of blood, there is radiance, fire reflecting off stained glass, fragments of colour falling like rain. The invasion isn't a scene of bodies, but of sounds. Swords striking stone, boots crushing prayers still hanging in the air. Wooden pews cracking like bones. The nuns are gathered in the courtyard. Flames from the burning monastery cast golden shadows on their white habits, trembling like wings. They're bound two by two. No one weeps. And then, when the invaders expect begging, something impossible happens. They sing, Agnus Dei, qui tollis peccata mundi, Lamb of God, who takes away the sins of the world. The soldiers don't understand the words, but the melody freezes their blood. It's the sound of faith confronting power, a language that needs no permission. Eleni stands among the flames, crucifix burning silver in the firelight. Her shadow projects onto ruined walls like a saint who refused to leave. The Ottoman captains hesitate. They came to destroy an enemy stronghold. Instead, they find women singing in the ruins. Eleni's voice, deep and serene, leads the chorus. Each note an affirmation. We are still here. When the last bell falls from the tower, the commander orders Eleni separated. They drag her to the center of the courtyard. She raises the cross, not as weapon or plea, but as mirror. In it reflects the ruin of her world. Power and faith stare at each other, and in that gaze, an invisible defeat is sealed. Eleni understands. The true act of resistance isn't to fight, it's to remain standing. Dawn arrives without birds. The hill has become a graveyard of stone. The survivors are chained with thick rope. Metal cuts skin. Blood mixes with red dust. They march in silence. Behind them, broken walls, melted bells, icons turn to ash. The sun beats their white veils transparent, as if faith itself is evaporating. But no one looks back. 7 days to the sea. When one stumbles, the others hold her up. When Sister Maria's habit tears, another lifts the cloth and places it over her head. Not vanity, dignity. Eleni is no longer with them, but her absence is a constant presence. They whisper her last words, if you cannot hold the cross, hold each other. On the 7th day, they reach the port. The sea glitters like an open wound. Ottoman ships wait, dark, massive, with lead-coloured sails. The sound of chains against wood echoes like a soulless litany. They're forced aboard one by one. On deck, the air is suffocating. They're tied to benches where prisoners and slaves travel. Ropes close around their wrists until circulation stops. No one speaks. When the ship pulls from shore, Greece vanishes. The olive groves, the hills, the broken bell tower. Everything becomes a grey line on the horizon, a burial of a homeland without a grave. For 12 days, the voyage is a procession of pain, sunburned skin, thirst becomes invisible torture. Then one night, when the sea roars like a beast, a voice rises from the chains. Weak, trembling, but clear. Magdalena, the youngest, the most fragile, sings a psalm. At first, just a murmur. Then the others join. The song spreads like flame. For a moment, the sea calms. Guards listen without understanding. Some secretly cross themselves. Others spit to ward off fear. But no one can silence that sound. It's a prayer that doesn't ask for salvation, but for meaning. Storms come. Waves hammer the hull. Wind tears veils away. Lightning illuminates gaunt faces. The nuns close their eyes and keep singing. Magdalena, soaked, lips cracked by salt, continues the psalms learned by heart. The girl who trembled before fire now guides her sisters through water. The ocean rages, but the song doesn't break. Constantinople, a forest of minarets piercing fog, golden domes shining like captive suns. The prisoners walk through cobblestone streets as crowds watch, merchants, beggars, slaves. No one insults or blesses them. They just watch these women in white, stained with dust and ash, pass like echoes from a past that refuses to die. In the distance, Hagia Sophia, now a mosque, its dome covered in gold and smoke, gleaming like a scar on God's memory. The nuns feel no hate, only immovable sadness. Even eternity can be conquered. They're taken to the administrative heart of power. Marble floors shine like ice. Scribes sit behind tables covered in parchments, writing without looking at the prisoners. Each name followed by a black line, a number, a possible use, no emotion. Only procedure. The Grand Vizier sits motionless, face carved by discipline. Through an interpreter, he offers clemency. Accept the empire's language and live. Convert. Receive a new name. New home, new faith. Refuse and disappear. The women remain silent. When no answer comes, the vizier signs a decree with a firm stroke. That signature is worth more than 1,000 swords. They're sent to the bowels of Topkapi Palace, underground corridors where air doesn't smell of incense, but iron and humidity. Light enters only through a high crack, a wound opened in stone. The cells line up beneath the palace gardens. Above them, tulips bloom, watered with water. Not mercy, they're given rough tunics. Each receives a number carved on a tablet. The empire wants to see how long faith takes to surrender to hunger. First weeks, benevolence. They bring oil, bread, fruit. Guards enter with measured smiles, offering rest and soft words. They speak of peace, of a merciful God who forgives those who yield. Your God and ours are not enemies, just strangers. But the women know, conversion isn't an open door. It's an erasure. When the empire's patience runs out, the second phase begins. Doors seal, food diminishes, water is rationed. No more imams or scribes, only silence, calculated silence, like acid, the first to break. Twin sisters from Corfu, their identical faces emptied of expression. They accept the new faith in voices barely heard. When they return, they wear silk and perfume. They're never seen again, but their loss doesn't weaken the group. It unites them. Damaris, the eldest, stops responding to her name. When guards call her, she whispers, "Call me Silence." From that day, silence becomes contagious. None speak another word to their captors. When asked questions, they stare at the floor or the void. The jailers, confused, don't know whether to punish them or fear them. In that tearless quiet is a strength the empire doesn't understand. Ottoman chronicles record their state with indifference, foreign captives of the old creed. Not productive, not communicative, but what bureaucrats call failure, history calls testimony. When they stopped speaking, the empire lost the power to command. Time dissolves in darkness. Days no longer counted by sunrise, but by the sound of water dripping in underground corridors. Then Magdalena discovers it. At the end of the passage, a different wall. Older stone, colder. Between the plaster joints, a current of air. They scrape with ceramic fragments. After hours, a sealed archway appears. Behind it, a forgotten chamber opens like a wound in the palace's belly. Small, barely enough room for all to kneel. Dust floats like golden incense in the beam of light, filtering through a ceiling crack. No guard patrols here. Years have erased it from the maps. For the captives, it's not another prison. It's a promise. They build their secret chapel. No altars or chalices, only stones and silence. From clay scraps they mold improvised candelabras. A torn piece of linen becomes a sacred cloth. From a broken mirror fragment, Magdalena makes a cross. Every night, when palace corridors sink into sleep, the women descend to this clandestine sanctuary. They don't sing hymns aloud. Lips barely move. Each breath is a prayer. Each tear, a consecration. The air, thick with dust and heat, fills with a murmur that doesn't come from voice, but from soul. Magdalena begins leaving evidence of their existence, not with ink, with charcoal. On the wall, she draws signs only they understand, a bird for each living sister, a flame for each one who falls. When one stops singing, her bird stands alone. The next night, Magdalena draws a flame beside it. Their gospel, written in stone and breath. Guards never discover the chapel, but they notice a change. The prisoners, instead of withering, walk with unsettling serenity. Their eyes, accustomed to darkness, shine like embers. Supervisors call it madness. Scribes define it as anomalous spiritual resistance. None understand that deep in the earth, the women have recovered what the empire can never steal. The sense of the sacred. Months pass. Maybe years. History doesn't record their end, only traces. Centuries later, archaeologists excavating beneath Topkapi break through a sealed chamber. Stone walls marked with tiny crosses, and a phrase in Latin, almost erased by time. Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in darkness. That inscription changes how we read history. It confirms the sisters weren't ghosts or legend, but silent witnesses of a faith that refused to die. In that small space, more tomb than chapel, the purest victory occurred. A belief that petrified itself to survive time. That last night they remembered together. The women lit a candle made from rationed oil scraps. The flame danced weakly on blackened walls, casting their shadows united. No one spoke. Magdalena looked around and understood. Silence was no longer a sentence. It was a form of eternity. When the light went out, the air stood still, but the stones preserved the flame's warmth, as if guarding the last breath of those who prayed there. And so, in the heart of the empire that tried to erase their names, darkness learned to illuminate itself. They say on full moon nights, when Topkapi's marble shines as if breathing, the wind carries a strange sound, not guards' footsteps, not garden murmurs, a barely audible song. It doesn't belong to this time or language. Some swear it's the voices of nuns who sang until the end, ascending through stone cracks toward light. For centuries, empire servants repeated the same story. In quiet dawns, air beneath courtyards suddenly chills. A scent of incense and burnt wax fills the halls. No one finds its origin, but everyone understands the message. The faith that was buried still breathes beneath the foundations of power. European chroniclers, fascinated by the mystery, collected the rumor. Some called it superstition, others penance. In letters and diaries, they wrote of the sisters' shadows, women who sang their own path to heaven, to the empire, ghosts, to history, witnesses, and perhaps the truth lives in the silence they left. The empire recorded every coin decree triumph, but never the weight of its guilt. It recorded everything except its sin. And that void in the archives, that gap between erased names, became its greatest confession, because some absences scream louder than any voice. Today, beneath the stones of Topkapi, something still whispers, not wind, not memory, justice, because no one fully conquers what sings.